Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Comic Book Workshop. If you're new to this series of tutorials, each week I'm basically looking at a different comic artist and looking at the way that they solve the common problems that comic book artists have to solve. And I'm showing you the different ways it is that they solve them, partly as an educational tool for you, the viewer, but also for myself because I am a comic artist. If you're interested in checking out my comics, I have a link to a free sample of my comic, the Philip K. Dick Files, a sci-fi horror comic, in the link in the description below. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel, and if you'd like to get some exclusive content like comics and more tutorials and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and let's jump into it. Today we are looking at Travis Charest, and I hope that's how you pronounce his last name. Oh, here it is up here, Charest. So this guy did Wildcats, X-Men Prime. Like I mentioned a couple of times on here before, a lot of the artists it is that I look at, I'm not always familiar with the books it is that they illustrate. And a lot of times I'm looking at these pages completely in a vacuum without knowing the full context of the story. I'm mostly interested in the storytelling techniques and the way that they organize things, right? Because what it is that I've talked about on this channel before is that comic book artists are very interesting to study because these guys, they have to put out a ton of work. And what's interesting about that is that they have to be very efficient with the way it is that they do things. And so there's lots of different ways that they organize the drawings it is that they do, the panels that they do. There's different creative decisions that they make that help them move through pages quicker, and then that also gives them more time to put a lot of the finish that they really like to do, like just go completely nuts with the detail on specific pages, on splash pages, or things it is that they really want to highlight. So the first thing it is that I notice is we have set, this awesome setup right here, right? And this is obviously a very deliberate decision to not only connect this black of this backdrop that these two figures are fighting on to a black silhouette, but it's also connected to the black of the frame itself, which I think is pretty useful. It's pretty useful to think of it as not just this shape here, but to think of it as the whole this whole black shape is basically holding the rest of this. And so that makes it helps make the rest of the things it is that I'm going to say make a little bit more sense. So I love the fact that we have these two shadows here duking it out. Oops, zoomed in a little bit too much. And we've got these lights from this lighthouse that are sitting on top of it and on top of these silhouettes. And that gives a little bit of dimension to this lighthouse back here. Now, what we have then is kind of this back and forth motion, right? So we have Wolverine on the left, and he's giving this chick a nice little hook punch there. I'm sure this was not not a recent comic, considering the world we live in today. But he's giving her he's giving her a punch, right? And she's reacting to it. And then she's coming back and she's giving him a kick in the face, right? And then standing, it looks like she's probably standing over him. And then we get a close up on the eye shot. So there's a couple of different things it is that we notice. For one thing, there is this motion from here to here. And then we could say it goes from here to here to here to here, right? So there's this kind of back and forth motion that goes throughout the entire drawing. And not only is there this back and forth, but there's also a continuous, basically panning into the scene, right? From here, we're getting this establishing shot, so we have a very strong distance away. And then we have this shot of Wolverine and this chick fighting. And then we have her retaliating. And each step of the way, we're getting closer and closer to this reaction shot of Wolverine. And it seems like he's got some sort of an idea or something has just clicked in his mind. of the next thing he's going to do. I don't have the follow-up page for this, so I'm not sure exactly how that plays out. But I think it also makes sense that this is also connected. This background element is also connected to this element up here, just in the same way that this black here also fades in and connects with this black here in this area, right? So, like I said, good design, a lot of it comes down to organizational skills, right? Um, a lot of it comes down to being able to organize things and to make them easily readable, right? We know exactly where it is that we're supposed to look here on this panel. We're supposed to see Wolverine's expression and this kind of eureka sign over here, this kind of symbol of he's figured something out. Uh, I'm not sure if this is the same chick, but there's a couple of different things it is that you can notice right away from this page. Now, for one, again, we have this forms, and I've talked about this before in the previous analysis on Mignola and on Sergio Tope and other comic artists, is they really like to blend in the blacks of the border that you have here and blend that in to the characters themselves, right? And they're kind of emerging out of it. So it feels like this figure here is emerging out of the blackness here. And in some ways it's emerging out of this same shadow, right? And for storytelling purposes, you could play around with that. You could have a border, a black border that separates two characters, and maybe they could be connected in some way, right? So that would be a way it is that you could connect the visual storytelling with like a visual idea. But it allows him to focus the detail where he wants it, which is this arm and the head, and then everything else just kind of falls into black, right? And then we have him. We have this nice shot of Wolverine poking his head in. He's looking down at something, and then we have these figures talking. He opens up a door, and we see this one shot of his eye, and then we see the monster's face, right? And so this is a nice progression, right? So he says, "Stay here, son. I'm going to find out what's happening." So something is going on in this separate scene, and notice that he separates both of these scenes. These are not a continuation of the scene. This is a continuation of the scene, you could say, in the sense that they're grouped together. These two panels are grouped together, right? Whereas this is obviously we've now transported in time or stepped into time, because we have this panel break, right? And again, we have that same sort of idea, which it makes it feel very organized, and it's very well illustrated and very beautiful to see that we have this figure that's in this black suit here, and they're connected to this black shape here, and they're also connected to this figure here, right? And this black shape here is connected with all of this, right? And this is really cool because we get this idea that there's a door that's opening and he's peering into it, and then we're getting like a reaction shot from him. Or perhaps this is just the eye of the monster emerging from the darkness, right? Maybe this is the first thing he sees, and then he sees this. And then we've got this hiss sound effect here. Very cool. Again, we have this separation of these panels, which is interesting because these do seem to be connected to one another. It seems like after he got done punching that woman in the face a few times in the previous pages that we looked at, it looks like he's now saving her. And I like the way that he uses the white to outline here. And like most comic artists, he's got this good gesture flowing through here. And as a lot of other comic artists do, he's also breaking the panel with this sword flying off of him, right? And then we have this other grouping of panels down here, which tells us a different story. A car driving up, Eckhart, he says to him, we see him looking out the window. He's holding up a what looks like some sort of paper, and then he watches as he drives off, and then turns around, and we see that he's looking over his shoulder, and it must be this woman. And I think I have the other piece. I'm gonna skip to that one real quick. I think this one may be it. Let's get rid of this one. Yeah, I think this may be it right here. So this is page 12. Yeah, okay. So then we have page 13. So if we look at these in terms of these two pages, we see a nice way that he's directing the the scene here. And it makes a little bit more sense now, right? So we have basically the highlights of these car as Wolverine is jumping and catching this woman and getting her out of the way of this car, and then we see that the car dashes past them, right? And here's the lighthouse, so we know we're close by the lighthouse. So this is as they were fighting, right? And we have this really nice diagonal shot of the car itself. And I'm curious what materials he works with. If you know what materials Travis works with, please let me know. I imagine they must be marker or something. But these are very beautifully rendered. But then we have the face here. And then we see the figure and he's holding up his paperwork. And then we see Wolverine looking over his shoulder. And then we see that he's now turned and he's looking over his other shoulder. And we have this as a teaser that's going to make us turn the page, right? So there's multiple things that this comic page accomplishes, which is very impressive, right? It looks like a piece of art that you would love to have. See, this is an original. It looks like it's sitting on his bed or something. Because I can see like the comforter or something here that he took a photo of this piece, but it's sitting down somewhere, so you know that it's a actually physical rendered piece, which makes it even more impressive because he's not using any digital techniques. But it looks like a piece of art. If you were a comic book fan and you loved the Wolverine, X-Men, Wildcats crossover, then you could totally buy something like this and get something like this framed. It would be nice framed because it works both as an illustration and as a storytelling comic, right? So you could say that this panel is broken away from these panels because this is almost like one story beat. And then this is basically a collection of story beats. It goes like this, and it goes actually very quickly, right? So you have this one big moment here. And you could say that he separates it from these panels to emphasize this big motion of what is it that's going on. We see these lights, but we don't know where the lights are coming from. And then we see, oh, okay, it was this car. And who is in this car? Who's Eckert? Right? Wolverine knows. And so not only does it work visually and that it's very beautiful, and it's also telling us the story visually in a way that's actually interesting. Um, it is also doing something that every comic artist should do, which is that it ends on a panel that makes you want to turn to the next page. And so let's see the next page. So this is the next page. We see the girl that he was fighting earlier has pulled up on what I would assume is a stolen Nazi uh, motorcycle with a sidecar, And she's basically got this attitude like, come on, let's go. I'm ready to go, right? And then we see Wolverine is walking up. He's obviously getting in the vehicle, and we see a number of different things going on here, right? So this panel is still connected to this one. These two panels are connected to one another, but there's a little bit of a break because this feels more like an illustration. It feels like a set piece, right? Like this feels like the big moment in the action movie when she says, "Come on, let's go, let's get them," right? And so then we have this character here, Wolverine. He's stepping towards the vehicle. We see them taking off. We see him with the Nazi regalia on, and we see the equipment here, right? And then we see them speeding up here. So it's interesting, right? So you could say that it really goes like this because he's looking down, and what does he see? He sees this, and then we see him driving off, and we see it like that, right? So that might be the proper way to read it. So let's go ahead and let's move on to the next one here. Um, uh-oh, I broke my Clip Studio. Let's move on to the next one, and then we'll close it out here pretty soon. So he did a bunch of stuff for Wildcats apparently, which is like a awesome comic series. I remember reading it as a kid. I don't remember much about it, to be honest with you. But he's got some beautiful work, beautiful, beautiful work. I mean, you can really see like these kind of shapes that seem to go through the whole thing, right? And this is all very intentional. You know, you've got these big shapes that are making these big kind of S curves and C curves throughout the piece. And it makes the illustration interesting to look at, but it also keeps your eye focused where it is that he wants you to look. And it essentially guides your eye in indirect ways, right? So, you know, I drew this line here like this, right? But as you can see, there's no there is a continuation of this kind of shape here, and then it goes up here like this, right? Even though these two shapes are not connected, they're very similar in the way it is that they flow through the page, right? There's this kind of motion, right? But there's no continuation for this side here. But I would say that the way that his body is angled and the way that this is angled is playing that same role. And the same thing with this, right? It's almost like it's bouncing off this debris. And again, like I said, you know, you have these great illustrations of a character who has a lot of detail surrounding them, and then you can drop a lot of like their detail into black, right? So there's lots of stuff going on like that. So yeah, I mean, he's a brilliant artist. I included his links that I was able to find in the link in the description box. Man, I really like this one. I like this figure. I'm curious what this guy's all about. But this looks like, it looks like some sort of World War II story. He's got some beautiful work, man. Totally worth checking out. I'll include any links I found in the description box. Like I've mentioned before, if you'd like to support what I do on this channel, or if you'd like to hang out with other artists, check out my Patreon. $5 a month, you get my comics, my Philip K. Dick comics, and then I've got tutorials that I put up there either earlier or I'll be doing some exclusively as well and posting them there. I also have a Discord channel in the link in the description box, as well as a store with prints and t-shirts and that sort of thing. So if you'd like to check any of that out, feel free to do so. And thank you so much for your time, guys. I hope this was useful. If there's any artists you'd like for me to look at and break their work down, leave a comment in the description, in the comment box. Thanks, guys.